Hello my dears, welcome back to another video. So today's topic is the tragedy of Harry and Meghan. So Harry and Meghan released a new Netflix series, which is like a docu-series basically. I'm going to be talking about what I learnt from the documentary and what I also felt made zero sense. Obviously this video is going to have a lot of spoilers, but to be entirely honest with you, I watched all 3 episodes and it was so boring. So you're not really missing much. It's just a whole lot of piano playing and them just basically repeating everything that they've already said again for us, except with an extra twist of them explaining how they met each other. Okay, so I knew that Diana was going to be featured in this because they put her in the trailer. But I had no idea how quickly they were going to throw her in there. They threw her on stage really quickly. Like she appears within the first like 15-20 minutes, and they're just talking a lot about her experience with the press and like how she was hounded by the press, which we can all agree the way the press treated Diana was disgusting and ultimately contributed to her end up losing her life. So they draw a lot of comparisons between Meghan and Diana and try and paint the image that what Diana experienced is what Meghan is experiencing. I also have a theory that the reason why they do this as well is because, how can I say this? Meghan and Harry's relationship is a bit weird. And you don't realize it until you listen to him talk enough times. Where they're trying to draw this proximity between Meghan and Diana, it also represents how Harry sees Meghan. If you listen to Harry, because I watched their Oprah interview and I also watched this docuseries, and I've listened to other interviews that they've done and stuff, what you'll notice is that Harry has this pattern of behavior where he regularly talks about his mother when he's talking about Meghan. So he does this thing where he regularly compares her to his mum. And that's not really like necessarily a bad thing, right? Because naturally we are all attracted to familiarity. So many of us may be attracted to personality traits in a partner that were present within one of our parents, right? So that within itself is not weird. But with Harry and Meghan, it kind of goes past that point to the point where it's kind of like a weird Freudian situation is going on there. It's kind of like, you know those women who have daddy issues, and so they have a tendency to date much older men because they're trying to fill the void of their father. That's Harry. Harry seems like he has mummy issues, and he's trying to fill the void of his mother with Meghan.
Open my heart to see what's going to happen. So much of what Meghan is and how she is so similar to my mum. She has the same compassion, she has the same empathy, she has the same confidence. She has this warmth about her.
He can't seem to compliment her or talk about the things that he loves about her without bringing up his mum. But what's really strange though is he will say that, but then he'll also say this.
I don't have many early memories of my mum. It was almost like internally I sort of blocked them out.
So how can you say that someone is so much like someone who you don't remember? I personally do not think that Meghan and Diana are remotely alike. But anyways, on to their relationship with the press. So within the documentary, like I said, they really try and paint the press as though they were hounding Meghan like they were with Princess Diana. Also within their trailer, they showed a lot of like images of paparazzi and stuff, and to try and show just how much paparazzi was surrounding them and hounding them. But then these have all been debunked.
There's new backlash today following the release of the second trailer for Harry and Meghan's Netflix documentary. In it, Harry compares the paparazzi's obsession with Meghan to his late mother, Princess Diana.
I was terrified. I didn't want history to repeat itself.
But now, this photo claiming to show a threatening paparazzi is being called fake.
I had to do everything I could to protect my family.
It turns out that photo is actually from the London premiere of Harry Potter in 2011, 5 years before Harry ever met Meghan. And then there's this. In the trailer, when Meghan complains about being hounded by paparazzi, this video is used to illustrate her point. But it turns out the footage is actually of photographers pursuing Donald Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen, outside his New York apartment. This video in the new trailer is also under fire.
You know, there's leaking, but there's also planting of stories.
The photographer behind the image tweeted, "This photograph used to suggest intrusion by the press is a complete travesty. It was taken from an accredited pool. H&M, meaning Harry and Meghan, agreed. I was there."
They also used the clip to illustrate how they're constantly harassed by the paparazzi. And the footage is actually taken from British celebrity Katie Price arriving in court last year over a drink driving charge. They flipped the video to try and make it look different from the original. And this one,
This feeding frenzy.
that's not Meghan, it's Catherine Middleton. Yeah, they're so hounded and harassed they can't even find one real example of it to put in their own trailer.
There's a part within the documentary where Meghan talks about how Harry told her to stop engaging with the press because they were starting to get the impression that Meghan liked it, or they were getting the impression that Meghan enjoyed the attention.
And I was like, oh, thanks, stay warm, guys. And I remember H the next day saying, you can't talk to them. And I was like, I'm just trying to be pleasant. Like, I don't know what to do. I've never dealt with this before. He's like, right, but the UK media are saying you love it. You're smiling, you love it.
I find it really interesting because Meghan kind of paints it as though, like, oh, you know, I don't enjoy it and I just didn't know what to do. But I watched this video where someone compiled a compilation of all of the footage of Diana's relationship with the press and Catherine's relationship with the press, and then Meghan's relationship with the press. And I'm going to put that in this video so you can see it for yourself. But when you look at it, you understand why the press got the impression that Meghan enjoyed the attention.
Lady Diana Spencer could never have guessed the treacherous road ahead.
Kate was called Waity Katie, waiting to marry William.
There were some paparazzi there, and they were shouting, "Slag, whore, bitch, look this way."
William and Kate had complained about the
Was repeating itself.
I think when it comes to the paparazzi, people really have short-term memories in terms of what Catherine actually went through. People really downplay what she went through with the paparazzi and paint it as though Meghan had a much worse experience. There's no evidence of that. Even within their own documentary, Meghan and Harry are unable to provide the evidence of them being harassed by the paparazzi. There's a part where she talks about how she was coming out from a flower shop and there must have been maybe 10 paparazzis there, you know, just like coming up to her. They were blocking her car.
I remember going to get flowers, coming out of the flower shop, and there must have been 9 or 10 paps standing in the middle of the street, and they were all sort of blocking the car by saying like, "Hey, how are you doing, Meghan? You having?" And I was like, "Oh, thanks, stay warm, guys."
But then they show the footage of that, and it's like nothing like she just described. This is what it looks like to be surrounded by paparazzi and have them blocking your car. There's also a part in the documentary where she talks about how her house, her Toronto home, was just surrounded by paparazzi, and they show footage from her CCTV camera, and there's like 2 people there.
Felt like all of the UK media descended upon Toronto. My house was just surrounded.
And it's like, okay, so where's the surrounding? Where are they at? Are they behind the bushes? Where are the rest of them? It's like they really struggle to actually be able to provide evidence of all of this paparazzi harassment that they experience, because in all of the footage where Meghan is actually genuinely surrounded by paparazzi, she's smiling. She looks like she's having a great time. She's signing autographs. She's taking pictures. She's living her best life. So I'm not sure at what point the harassment actually took place, because when you look at Catherine, you can see that Catherine was genuinely harassed by the press. She wasn't signing autographs and taking pictures and waving and smiling. She actually was genuinely hounded. And I think people really forget how badly Catherine was treated by the press, because people have very short-term memories. And because Catherine handled it so well, I think people have just forgotten about it. But the truth is, Catherine was treated much worse by the press. She just complained less, so you've forgotten about it. I think that Meghan loved the attention of the press, and I think she loved the paparazzi. I think she only started to dislike it when negative stories were being released about her as well. Once she started getting accusations of bullying from the palace. So I think the people who quit are the ones who likely leaked the stories about her to the press. If you're interested in a deep dive into why stories about Meghan in the press went from being overwhelmingly positive to starting to become quite negative, Baggage Claim actually does a really interesting analysis into that. I will link her video in my description box. Meghan claims that the negative press and stuff that she received is because of misogyny. And I just find that fascinating, because the Queen was a woman and she was loved by the press as well themselves, so I'm confused about that one. Even Diana, even when she was being hounded by the press, she was still adored by people and still loved. So I don't quite. She also says that she had never been treated like she was black until she came to the UK. Now, she doesn't quite elaborate on what exactly that means, and I also find it interesting that she even refers to herself as black, because I think this is an American thing, because here's the thing. In the UK, we don't look at mixed race people as black. But I've noticed that Americans do. It seems like in America, mixed race people are seen as a subcategory of black. So they're not viewed as their own separate group of people. They're viewed as a subcategory within black. Whereas in the UK, it's not like that. It's not the norm for you to call a mixed race person black. There are some mixed race people who identify themselves as black, and there are some people who will call a mixed race person black, but that's not the norm. I don't know, maybe it's like a cultural difference thing or what, but I find it very weird when they refer to Meghan as black, because she's not. So when she says, I wasn't treated like I was black until I moved to the UK, it gets even more confusing, because it's like people in the UK view mixed race people as their own separate category, so they wouldn't even treat you like you were black anyway, even if you were less racially ambiguous. Meghan also says in the documentary that we made her race a big issue in the UK, and I find that quite odd, because I would actually say that that was her biggest appeal to the people in Britain, because I remember a lot of the time people on the news and also people within the general public saying that this was a sign of a new era. This was a sign of the royal family becoming more modernized, because now we were going to have a mixed race princess. That was a lot of her appeal. So I don't know why she's painting it as though that was a problem. And it also doesn't make any sense, because if that was the reason why people disliked her, they would have disliked her from the beginning. But you'll see from Baggage Claim's video that that wasn't the case. People overwhelmingly loved her in the beginning, but then started to dislike her later on because of her character. But anyways, regardless of this, Meghan believes that the press were racist because she's black, and so that was the reason why they were mistreating her. And they referenced the Compton headline, the Meghan is nearly straight out of Compton headline. This is the only headline that they reference as evidence of racism. And I think the reason for that is because it's the only headline that could be interpreted as racist, because they did the same thing. This is the exact same headline that they referenced within the Oprah interview. They reference it again within the docuseries. The other thing that they also mentioned within the Oprah interview was this whole tainted blood thing. So I tried to find where that came from. There wasn't a single press article or headline that said that Meghan was tainting the royal blood. That was not something that the press was saying. But that was something that was said by a woman called Jo Marley, who was the girlfriend of a UKIP leader or something at one point. She is the one who said that Meghan was going to taint the royal blood. And she said a lot of other really disgusting racist things in general about black people, and about her disapproval of Meghan marrying into the royal family. And although I think it's right to condemn her for saying that, what I don't like is the fact that people have taken something that one individual woman has said and painted it as if that is something that the general British public believed, or something that the British press were saying, which is false. And that was not the beliefs of the people in the British public. The British public were overwhelmingly supportive of Meghan and Harry getting together. There's a reason why thousands and thousands of the British public swarmed the streets on their wedding day. Why would they do that if they didn't want to welcome her to the country? It's just, it doesn't make any sense. So yes, the whole tainted blood thing was said, but it was said by one individual. And I think it's wrong for that one individual to be painted as though their opinion and their views was the consensus of the country or the British press, when there's no evidence of that. So let's get into the Compton article, right? Because the Compton article is Meghan and Harry's go-to of evidence of racism within the British press. Okay, so this was an article released by the Daily Mail. So the title itself was, Harry's Girl is almost straight out of Compton. Gang-scarred home of her mother revealed. So will he be dropping by for tea? So it says, Prince Harry's new girl, suit star Meghan Markle, is from Crenshaw, LA. Crenshaw, LA has endured 47 crimes in the past week, including murder. Gangs, including the Bloods, count the neighborhood as their territory. Markle's social worker mum, Doria Ragland, lives in a rundown area, and the actress's aunt, Ava Barrow, is in a nearby gang-affiliated Inglewood. Now, here's the thing. If you are American, I can completely understand why you would think that that's racist. I do think that that article was prejudice. However, I don't think it was prejudice in the way that Meghan thinks it was prejudice, because Meghan thinks that this article was being prejudiced towards her race, but this article was actually being prejudiced towards her class. Now, America and Britain are quite different in that we have different obsessions, right? So America's obsessed with race. That's why it plays such a big part in their politics, you know, and it makes sense. When you think about America's history, race has been a very key part in American history, so it makes sense as to why it's such a big part of their culture. But the thing is, Britain is not like America. We are not obsessed with race, but we are obsessed with class. And I think the reason for that is because we still have a monarch, we have a very clear hierarchy when it comes to class. So all of us are conscious about where we land within that hierarchy. And so what this article was doing was actually being quite classist towards Meghan's economic status background. That's the reason why in the article they say, will Harry be dropping by for tea? Like, will he be dared to go in such an area? You know, that's the reason why they mention the crime rates and the gang affiliations and all this kind of stuff. And that's the reason why they also mentioned her mum's career, the fact that she's a social worker. The reason why they mentioned all these details is because their point is that Meghan is too common, basically, to marry Harry. They did the exact same thing to Catherine. When William and Catherine first got together, they spoke about Catherine like he had just pulled her off of a council estate. If you're American and you don't know what a council estate is, it's government housing. Basically, government housing. Now, Catherine actually does come from a privileged background. Like, she comes from an upper middle class background. But because she doesn't come from royalty and she doesn't come from within the royal circle, the British press still thought she was too common to be dating William or to even marry William. In Britain, we are very classist. People will make preconceptions about you based on your accent. People will make preconceptions about you based on the area that you live in, you know, what your postcode is. So I can understand why to an American who doesn't understand that, because you're not as obsessed with class as we are, I can understand why you would look at that and go, oh my God, they're being racist, because in America, you guys are more centered around race. But you have to look at the article within the context in which it was written and the culture in which it was written within. This is a British tabloid, and it was written by someone who would have been socialized in British culture. So yes, this article was being prejudiced, but it was being classist, not racist. So I also forgot to mention this headline as well, that some people have said is racist. And the reason why people thought that it was racist is because it has the word niggling in it. So the word niggling means causing slight but persistent annoyance, discomfort, or anxiety. Now, this is a word that is commonly used in Britain. Just because the first 4 letters in it are the same as the first 4 letters in another word doesn't mean that they suddenly become the same word. So this headline is not racist. The person who wrote this headline is essentially saying that they have this annoying, persistent worry about this particular engagement photo for whatever reason. Another thing that happens within the documentary is she talks about the first time she ever met William and Catherine, and she talks about how she expected them to, you know, be quite casual with her, and she didn't expect them to be so formal. And she talks about how she's always been a hugger, but they weren't kind of giving her that same energy.
Even when Will and Kate came over and I had met her for the first time, they came over for dinner. I remember I was in ripped jeans and I was barefoot. It's like I was a hugger. I've always been a hugger. I didn't realize that is really jarring for a lot of Brits. I guess I'd started to understand very quickly that the formality on the outside carried through on the inside.
I don't know. I feel like, again, I think this is just a cultural difference thing. If I met someone for the first time and they hugged me, they were like, oh my God, hi, and they hugged me, I would think, wow, they're really friendly. But I would also find it a bit weird because you typically hug people you know. You don't hug people you're meeting for the first time. She kind of paints them as if they were being cold and unwelcoming towards her. But I think that that's just a misinterpretation based on the cultural differences between Brits and Americans. And I think Harry has done a poor job of explaining that to her, because someone not hugging you the first time they meet you does not mean they hate you, okay? It's just not normal to just go around hugging people you don't know like that. I said this before in a previous video that Americans are a lot more preppy. You're a lot more high energy, you know, than we are. British people are very polite, but we're not as high energy. Americans, you guys are like, give like high energy. Hi! We'll say hello, nice to meet you. Maybe give you a handshake. You know what I mean? But to be going in with a bear hug, that's a bit much. The rest of the documentary is just them talking about Britain's colonial history, talking about the Commonwealth, talking about slavery, talking about Stephen Lawrence, talking about Brexit. The purpose of all of this, to me, seems to be to basically point out and say that Britain is just this most racist hellhole, pretty much, and look at all of these examples of racism, which I found to be quite problematic, especially with the Brexit thing, because it's like you're just feeding into the stereotype that everyone who voted for Brexit is a racist. And I think why they've had to go down that direction is because they don't have any evidence of explicit racism within the press, right? The closest they can get is this Compton headline. So they can't actually say that. So what they've had to go with instead is say that the British press have racist undertones. And I think the reason why they've gone to talk about Britain's colonial past and slavery and all this kind of stuff is because if they can convince us that Britain is this inherently racist hellhole, then it would make sense, of course, as to why the British press would go after Meghan. Even though they're not explicitly being racist towards her, it at least explains their motives and their motivation. My issue with this argument is it doesn't make any sense, because Meghan's press coverage originally was overwhelmingly positive. If someone's racist, they normally hate you before they even speak to you. They kind of hate you from the get-go. That's typically how you know if there's a chance that someone's dislike towards you is motivated by prejudice, is if you've never even spoken to them and you've never given them a reason to dislike you, and automatically they hate you. But the thing is, the British public overwhelmingly loved Meghan in the beginning, and then they began to dislike her as time goes by. So if people love you to begin with and then dislike you later, it's usually because you've done something. When they try and claim that Meghan's harassment, quote unquote, by the press was motivated by racism, it just doesn't make any sense, because why was Kate harassed then? Why was Diana harassed? Why was Fergie harassed? Why have all these other royal family members who are white been harassed by the press? If they've all been harassed by the press as well, surely that should tell you that it's not because of race. And her harassment, quote unquote, wasn't even as bad as the others. It wasn't as bad as Diana's. It wasn't as bad as Catherine's. It just doesn't make any sense. Since Harry and Meghan are unable to figure out why the British public have turned on them, allow me to try my best to assist. From what I've seen, the reason why people dislike them is because they happily allowed British taxpayers to fund their wedding and to also fund their lifestyle, only for them to not respect royal traditions or customs, and for Meghan to quit her royal duties just 72 days after receiving her title. Harry's entire life of luxury has been funded by hard-working British people, the same British people who stood in the streets for hours to celebrate his union to his new wife, only for Harry and Meghan to disrespect them as well as insult their home country in public for profit. Harry says that he wants to protect his family whilst he tries to destroy the family that raised him and cared for him before he even knew who Meghan was. In going after the monarchy, he's also tainting the legacy of his late grandmother and everything that she dedicated her life to uphold, selling his family out and humiliating them publicly for whoever is willing to pay the highest price. They said they wanted privacy, although now that they're being criticized, they're trying to backtrack. Unfortunately for them though, the internet is forever and the evidence of them saying that still exists.
Everyone has a right to their privacy. It's the sort of incessant need to find out every little bit of detail about what goes on behind the scenes. The private life has to be private.
Despite saying they wanted their privacy, they still have managed to sell books, do podcasts, interviews, speeches, and now a docuseries, which leaves us all wondering, did they ever actually want privacy or did they just want to control the spotlight? The biggest issue that people have with them is their victimhood complex. They complain that no one understands them and that what they've experienced is very unfair. But do you want to know what's actually unfair? The fact that many people are currently sinking deeper and deeper into poverty. Thousands in the UK are expected to die this winter because they can't afford their heating. People are struggling right now, and so they don't really have the time to care about a privileged prince and his privileged wife having a public family feud with their family, as well as them complaining that they received a few bad headlines in the press. I can't lie to you, I do find it a bit ironic that Harry and Meghan are winning an award for fighting racism, when I would argue that their recent shenanigans have actually caused a lot of divisions in this country, as well as helped to increase racial tensions. Well, that's it for me. Let me know in the comments what you think about this whole situation. Maybe you don't even care. If you don't care, I rate you. Because to be honest with you, you clearly have more productive ways to spend your time, so I approve. If you like this video, then like and subscribe. Do check me out on other socials. I'm now tweeting, you guys. Thank you so much for giving me your time today, and I will see you in my next video.